Smoke filled the sky above Colony X-12 as the last tower crumbled to the ground. Flames licked at the horizon while the ground quaked under every step of the approaching enemy. No one had expected war, especially not from the stars. The people of the colony were scientists, workers, and farmers. They had no army, no defense systems, just hopes and schedules. But on that quiet morning, a tear opened in the sky and brought death through it. The ships were shaped like blades, black and red with glowing patterns. Alien runes burned across their sides as they descended like hawks upon prey. The people stared up, frozen. Then the screams began. Within minutes, the colony's control center was ash. A large figure stepped through the fire, cloaked in armor made from shining obsidian. She was the warlord. Her eyes glowed silver, and her voice shook the earth. "This world is mine now. Kneel or be forgotten," she declared to the frightened survivors. Humans who resisted were struck down by her elite soldiers. They were towering beasts in jagged armor, each twice the size of a man. Among them stood her personal champion, brute named Drezek, known across galaxies for splitting tanks with bare hands. The warlord smiled as Drezek crushed the last resistance fighter beneath his foot. She believed the humans were weak, broken, and ready to serve, but she had not met Captain Jace Arden. Jace was no commander now. Dishonor and false charges had stripped him of rank. Still, he watched from the forest ridge, dirt on his face, weapon in hand, rage in his heart. He had buried his sister the night before, her body still warm from Drezek's attack. She had tried to protect the medical bay, unarmed. Jace never forgot her smile. He never forgave what the aliens had done. He moved like shadow through the forest, watching the warlord's troops set up their new base. No one noticed him, he counted. Their movements, patterns, rotations. Every hour, every gap, every weakness. He wasn't alone. Survivors joined him in secret. A mechanic, a medic, a miner, and a boy who'd never held a gun before. He trained them, pushed them, turned them into something more. One night they struck. They didn't go for the heart. They went for the throat. Power stations were sabotaged. Rations stolen. Comms scrambled. The aliens blamed each other, suspecting betrayal from within. The warlord grew angry. Her orders turned to executions. She lined up her own guards, looking for answers in their eyes. Drezek stood by her side, silent and loyal. A monster waiting for release. Jace knew he couldn't hide forever. They would find the humans soon, so he made a decision. He would face them. Alone, if he had to. The plan was simple. Draw Drezek out. Use the ruins of the old power core as an arena. Explosives were planted, roots prepared. All Jace needed was one chance to bring the monster down. But the warlord was not foolish. She sensed the trap. She smiled, cold and cruel, and sent Drezek. With a full escort, Jace waited in the shadows of the shattered core. His heart was calm, his breath steady. When the monster arrived, Jace stepped forward and lit a flare. It cast red light across his face. The soldiers raised their weapons. Drezek raised his fists. Jace threw the flare high. The ruins lit up as charges exploded. Rubble buried half the squad. Smoke choked the air. And in the chaos, Jace lunged forward, blades drawn. He didn't fight with strength. He fought with fury. He ducked, dodged, cut, and bled. Drezek laughed at first, but then his shoulder was sliced. His leg cracked under a kick. For the first time, he felt pain. And then the human whispered, "For my sister," and brought both blades down on Drezek's chest. The beast didn't roar. He gurgled. He fell. He split. The warlord, watching through her drone, stood frozen. Her laughter stopped. Her smile faded. She stared at the image of her champion broken in half, with a single human standing over him like a storm made flesh. Her fury would burn brighter now. Her eyes turned to the horizon. She whispered a name she had thought unworthy. A name that now echoed in every camp, every drone feed, every soldier's trembling breath. Jace Arden. Asterisk. The news of Druzak's defeat spread like wildfire across the stars. To the alien empire, it was more than a loss. It was humiliation. The strongest warrior of the warlord had fallen to a single human with no rank and no army. The warlord stood before her throne of black stone, flames burning on both sides of the hall. Her claws tapped the edge of her seat as she watched the replay again and again. Jace's final strike haunted her thoughts. He had not killed in fear. He had killed with purpose. He had not run. He had stood tall, even knowing death would follow. That kind of strength could not be ignored. The council begged her to retreat and regroup. She didn't listen. Instead, she summoned a new force. Assassins, hunters, beasts from the edge of the empire. She wanted Jace's head, not as a trophy, but as a warning. Meanwhile, Jace wasn't celebrating. He buried the dead with his team in silence. They had lost 3 during the ambush. The boy who had never held a gun now lay beneath the soil. "We're not soldiers," the mechanic said. "We can't win this war." "We're not trying to win it," Jace answered. "We're trying to make her bleed." And bleed she did. Every night something burned. Supply ships exploded mid-air. Watchtowers fell before dawn. The alien war machine shook under the weight of a ghost they could not catch. They called him the Blade of the Dirt. They said he rose from soil, struck and vanished. Even the warlord's beasts began to fear the dark. But the warlord was no fool. She studied Jace's movements. She understood what he was doing. He wasn't just surviving. He was building something. A rebellion, a legend. She decided to crush it with her own hand. So she came down from her ship in a storm of light and fire. The earth trembled as her throne landed in the heart of the human ruins. She walked among the ashes in her dark armor, daring the human to face her. Jace saw the ship from the hills. His hands tightened around his blade. The others urged him to wait, to plan, to run. But Jace knew what had to be done. He walked alone into the ruins with nothing but his sword and the memory of the people they'd taken from him. The warlord stood in the center, her cloak moving like shadows around her. Her eyes glowed like twin moons. She raised one hand and the guards stepped back. "You killed Druzak," she said. "I buried more friends than I can count," Jace replied. She smiled. "You fight well. Serve me, and I will give you planets to rule." Jace didn't answer. He didn't need to. His sword was already drawn. The warlord nodded slowly and unsheathed her own blade. It was forged from starlight and bone. Their duel began in silence. No crowd, no rules. Just rage and resolve. Steel clashed. Sparks danced. Her power was overwhelming. Every strike from her sent shockwaves through the ground. Jace staggered, bled, and fell, but always rose again. She slashed across his chest. He stabbed her side. They circled like wolves, both wounded, both burning with fire that came from somewhere deeper than blood. Then she made a mistake. She underestimated his pain. She thought she had broken his spirit. But pain was his weapon. With a sudden turn, Jace dropped to one knee, twisted his body, and drove his blade into the joint of her armor. The warlord screamed, not in pain, but in fury. She struck back, knocking Jace into the dirt. Blood filled his mouth, vision blurred. But still he stood. "You refuse to die," she growled. "I refuse to lose," he answered. And then he did something she didn't expect. He dropped his blade and stepped forward barehanded. The warlord lunged to strike, but he caught her wrist. With his other hand, he pulled the pin from the explosive at her waist. The blast was small, controlled, but enough to send them both flying. Dust swallowed the battlefield. When it cleared, they lay in silence, Jace barely breathing. The warlord stunned. He rolled to his feet, picked up his blade. and pointed it at her. "This world will never kneel," he said, and the people watching from the hills began to chant one name, Jace. Jace stood in the middle of the scorched ground, chest rising with every breath. Smoke curled around him as the warlord struggled to her knees, her armor cracked, one side of her face bleeding. She looked up, confused not at his strength, but at the fire in his eyes. It wasn't hate. It was something older, deeper, something that couldn't be broken. The warlord raised her hand to call for reinforcements, but they didn't come. Her soldiers stood frozen, watching from the shadows. They saw her fall, and they saw him rise. One human had done what no army ever had. Jace didn't strike again. He walked away, leaving her alive but defeated. His message was clear. Fear him, yes, but more than that, respect the spirit of his people. As he reached the hill, his team surrounded him. They stared at his wounds, his torn clothes, his bloodied blade. No one spoke. They simply nodded. In the days that followed, colonies that had once surrendered began to resist. Menors became saboteurs. Doctors became messengers. Even children carried secrets through the shadows. The warlord retreated to her warship. She didn't speak for 3 days. Her pride was shattered, her image weakened. The Empire began to whisper, maybe humans are not prey, maybe they are fire. She summoned her advisors. Some begged her to return home and regroup. Others warned that attacking again would spark a war they couldn't control. But one voice spoke louder than the rest, her second champion, Veskari. A female warrior with silver horns, 6 arms, and a cold heart. She never smiled. She only killed. "I will bring you his head," Veskari said. The warlord nodded. She trusted Veskari. She had trained her since childhood. If anyone could defeat Jace, it would be her. Far below, Jace and his people rebuilt. They didn't have much, just tools, some salvage tech, and determination. But they had something stronger than weapons. They had each other. Jace stood at the edge of a new outpost being built with old materials. He looked at the children carrying supplies. He watched a girl carve a symbol into stone, a symbol of a blade rising from the earth. "We need allies," Jace said. "If we stand alone, we fall." He sent out coded messages across the stars, calls for aid, signals of rebellion. Not all replies were friendly, but one came from a place he didn't expect, a former alien slave. Her name was Sitha. She had escaped the warlord's prisons and now led a group of outcasts in the ruins of a dead moon. She spoke with scars on her skin and hate in her heart. "I don't trust humans," she told Jace, "but I hate her more." They agreed to meet. Jace traveled alone to the dead moon. It was lifeless, cracked, and cold. But the moment he stepped into the ruins, weapons were aimed at him from the shadows. He didn't flinch. Sitha appeared, tall and armored, with her eyes glowing dim gold. She studied him, searching for weakness. Then she stepped closer and offered her hand. He took it. Together, they planned a strike, not on a ship, not on a camp, but on the Empire's fuel world, Zarvith Prime. If they cut the heart, the arms would weaken. They had 2 weeks to prepare. Every fighter trained harder. Every machine was rewired. Every risk was accepted. Jace knew this mission could break them, but it could also change everything. In orbit above Zarvith Prime, Veskari sharpened her blades. Her orders were simple: kill the human and make the rest watch. She whispered one word as she stared into the stars. Jace. Zarvith Prime was a planet built on fire. Massive rivers of lava carved glowing lines across its surface. Giant towers drilled into its molten heart to harvest energy for the Empire's warships. It was more fortress than world. Sitha's team knew the planet well. She had once mined there as a slave, forced to work through heat and pain while the warlord's banners flew above her head. Now she would return, not as a slave, but as a sword. Jace studied the holograms carefully. Every access tunnel, every ventilation shaft, every fuel vent became part of their strategy. There would be no reinforcements, no backup. If they failed, they would die buried in the heat. "We don't strike the shield generators," Jace said. "We strike the pressure vanes. One overload, and the towers collapse from inside." The team prepared in silence. Each person knew what was at stake. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to tear the Warlord's empire apart from the core. Veskari received word of strange movements near the fuel world. She did not wait. She descended with her own elite squad, hand-picked killers who feared nothing. Her ship cut through the clouds like a blade. Scytha led her strike team through an abandoned shaft beneath the surface. Jace followed close behind, guiding the explosives strapped to their backs. Sweat poured down their faces as the heat rose. "We plant and run," Jace reminded them. "No hero moves. We live to strike again." But fate does not honor plans. As the last charge was placed, the alarm screamed to life. Red lights flashed. Steel walls closed. And from the far end of the tunnel, a shape emerged, tall, armored, and carrying 6 glowing blades. Veskari had arrived. The heat shimmered around her. Her horns curved upward like the wings of a beast. Her voice echoed in the tunnel like metal grinding stone. "Which of you is the human?" Jace stepped forward without hesitation. "I am," he said. Veskari tilted her head. "You're smaller than I expected." "Most monsters are smaller once you face them," Jace replied. She smiled, then vanished in a blink. Her speed was unreal. Blades slashed, sparks flew. Jace dodged left, blocked right, rolled back, and struck with everything he had. The tunnel became fire and steel. Every move could be death. Every breath could be the last. Scytha shouted for the others to escape with the detonators. Jace did not argue. He fought alone. Veskari's style was cold and perfect. No wasted movement, no mercy. Jace fought with pain, memory, and instinct. Every scar told him where to move. Every loss gave him strength. She cut his side. He punched her throat. She kicked him down. He grabbed her ankle and dragged her to the fire vent. They crashed together as flames roared around them. Her armor began to crack. His skin burned. But neither stopped, neither fell. Until she lunged for his neck. He ducked, grabbed her middle blade, and shoved it straight through her chest. Silence filled the tunnel. Veskari staggered back, shocked. Her hands trembled as she looked down at the wound. Her breath caught. Then her knees gave out. Jace stood over her, barely conscious, blood dripping down his face. His voice was raw. "You are not Drezuk," he said. Then he fell. Scytha returned with 2 others and dragged him out just before the explosives blew. The tunnel collapsed behind them, and with it, the Warlord's main fuel tower crumbled into the lava below. From orbit, the explosion looked like the planet's heart had burst open. The rebellion had struck harder than ever before. And now, the Warlord had lost more than fuel. She had lost her second champion. The Warlord stood alone in the dark chamber of her flagship. The lights were low. The silence was heavy. Veskari's broken blades lay on the floor before her, cold and still. Her eyes did not blink. Her claws tapped slowly on her throne. She had lost Drezuk. Now Veskari was gone too. And both had fallen to the same human. Jace Arden had become more than a problem. He had become a symbol. A crack in her empire's armor that was growing wider every day. She called upon her final weapon. A creature from the void. A being not loyal by blood or coin, but bound by ancient debt. The shadows twisted as it entered her chamber. No name. No face, just whispers and claws. It would not fail. Far below, Jace lay unconscious in the medbay of the rebel outpost. His wounds were deep, his pulse weak. The doctors worked nonstop. Scytha stood nearby, arms crossed, her face hard but her eyes worried. He should have died. The medic said, but he didn't. Jace woke 2 days later. His first words were not of pain or fear. He asked one question, did we win? Sitha smiled for the first time since she joined him. You crushed the tower. You killed her champion. You made her bleed again. Jace tried to stand. His legs shook but didn't fail. He looked around the room at the people gathered. Old faces and new, survivors, fighters, believers. I'm not done, he said. Rebellion had grown. Now it stretched beyond one colony. Whole systems were whispering his name. The Empire had become afraid to send ships without triple escorts. But fear is dangerous when cornered. The warlord unleashed the creature. It dropped onto the surface of a moon where rebels were hiding. By morning, no one remained. Only scorch marks and silence. Jace received the message. No threats. Just the image of ash shaped like his name. He knew what it meant. She was done sending champions. Now she was sending death itself. We fight it, Jace said. We don't run. Sitha stared at the footage. You can't fight what has no form. Then I'll find a way to give it one, he replied. They gathered minds from across the sector. Engineers, priests, ancient warriors, even an exiled alien noble who had once studied forgotten weapons. Together they created a trap, not of fire, but of sound and light. It was set in the ruins of an old listening post, a place where the void beast would expect weakness. But inside, every wall had hidden tech designed to force it into physical shape. Jace stood at the center, armored, prepared. He was the bait. The creature came at night. It poured through cracks like liquid shadow, crawling across walls and swallowing light. But when it entered the core, the trap activated. Sonic waves burst. Energy barriers snapped into place. The shadows twisted and screamed as the beast formed into a body of smoke and jagged bone, and Jace charged. He fought not like a man, but like the memory of every soul the beast had taken. His blade sang through the air. The trap pulsed brighter with each hit. The creature roared and struck, tearing walls, bending steel. Jace was thrown, cut, burned, nearly broken. But he rose again. He always did. With one final cry, he leapt into. The air drove his blade straight through the creature's core and activated the final pulse. The trap exploded in white light. The beast wailed and scattered like ash in the wind. When the smoke cleared, Jace stood in the ruins, shaking but alive. He had killed what could not die. The message went out before he could speak. Systems across the Empire heard it. And on the warlord's ship, for the first time in years, she did not speak at all. Because now, the galaxy believed in him. The warlord's empire was crumbling, not with fire from above, but with fire from within. Planets once loyal now hesitated to answer her call. Stations delayed orders. Supply routes went silent. Her soldiers whispered Jace's name in fear. Her allies began speaking of retreat. But the warlord did not bend. She summoned her generals and burned their maps. She had no use for defenses anymore. She would not wait for Jace to come to her. She would go to him in a final act of pride. She mobilized her flagship, Oblivion's Wrath, a vessel forged from the bones of dying stars. As wide as a city and armed with weapons that had once destroyed moons. She declared one message across all frequencies. Jace Arden, your rebellion ends now. Face me in the ruins of Galderon, or I will erase every system that ever spoke your name. Jace received the transmission in silence. The outpost went still. The younger fighters trembled. But he stood tall. I'll go, he said. Sitha grabbed his arm. She's calling you to die. She's calling me to finish this, Jace replied. Galderon was a dead world. No water, no cities, just rust, stone, and echoes. A perfect place for an empire's final breath. Jace landed alone. No squad. No weapons but his blade and the symbol carved into his chestplate. He walked through the dust. his eyes never leaving. The looming shadow of Oblivion's wrath. The warlord stepped out of her landing bay, draped in black armor streaked with silver. Her voice carried across the stone plain without effort. You killed my champions, you burned my towers. You turned my army against me. You made them monsters, Jace said. I showed them another way. Her eyes narrowed. Will you fight me here and now? No tricks, no armies. Just us, he said, and they began. Her blade burned with starfire. His sword glowed with stolen light. Every strike cracked the ground. Every blow tore the sky. The dust rose like a storm around them. They fought like gods forgotten by time. Jace bled early, a deep cut across his leg. She cracked a rib under his guard. They clashed. Again and again, each refusing to fall. Neither spoke. Words no longer mattered. She spun low and knocked him down. Her blade swung toward his neck. He caught it with both hands and forced it back. With a roar, he kicked her off and surged forward. His blade found a gap in her armor. Her strike carved across his shoulder. The ground split beneath their feet. Sparks danced across their bodies. She stepped back, panting. Her armor hissed, leaking energy. He dropped to one knee, blood dripping into the dust. Still, they stared into each other's eyes. Then she laughed. You are the last human I expected to fear. I'm not here to be feared, Jace said. I'm here to end this. And he charged one final time. Their blades met in a burst of white fire. The light swallowed the world around them. Even the sky above seemed to pause. When the brightness faded, only one figure stood in the silence. Jace Arden, bloodied, burned, but alive. At his feet lay the shattered armor of the warlord. Her eyes were open, but no breath came. Her reign had ended not in glory, but in silence. Jace turned and looked at the sky. His voice was calm but firm. Let them know, she is gone. You are free now. The rebellion had not just won a battle, it had broken an empire. For the first time in years, the stars above Colony X-12 were quiet. No fire, no ships, no war cries. Just silence. News of the warlord's death spread faster than light. Her empire shattered like thin glass. Entire fleets turned around. Her generals surrendered. Her banners were torn down and burned by the very hands that once raised them. Jace did not return as a hero on a throne. He walked through the gates of the outpost with his sword in hand and blood on his armor. His eyes scanned the faces of those he had fought for. Children ran to him. Old fighters dropped their tools. Scytha stood near the wall, arms crossed, and for once her eyes softened. You did it, she said. We did it, Jace answered. But victory brought more than peace. It brought questions. The rebellion now had to become something greater. It had to become a home. Systems that had lived in fear now looked to Jace for guidance. They called him the blade that never broke, but Jace refused titles. He formed a council of voices, human and alien, soldier and scholar. He knew one leader could fall, but many together could rise. Rebuilding began. Burned colonies were lifted brick by brick. Broken families were reunited. The scars remained, but the healing had begun. The throne of the warlord was melted into tools. Her warship was stripped for parts and used to power farms and schools. Her name became a warning in history, not a legacy. And Jace? He returned to the hills near the forest where he had buried his sister. He built a small home on that ridge and planted a tree where she rested. Every morning, he sat beside it, quiet and thoughtful. Visitors came from distant worlds just to see him. He never turned them away, but he never boasted. He spoke little, and when asked what drove him to stand against the most feared force in the galaxy, he gave only one answer. They gave me no choice. So I gave them no mercy. Time passed, seasons changed. The galaxy moved forward, but legends do not fade where truth lives, and in the stories whispered across markets, schools, and deep spaceports, they still speak of a single human who faced champions, monsters, and a warlord and did not kneel. They speak of Jace Arden, the man who split a champion in half and ended an empire with a blade and a promise.